In the small town of Eldridge, nestled in the rolling hills of northern Vermont, life moved at a gentle pace. The town's main street was lined with clapboard houses, their porches adorned with hanging flower baskets that swayed in the late summer breeze. Eldridge was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, where children rode bikes until dusk, and where the annual Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year. But beneath its idyllic surface, Eldridge held secrets. Secrets that would unravel in a way no one could have predicted. Lila Harper, 22, was the heart of her family and a beloved figure in Eldridge. Born on a crisp October morning in 2002, she was the youngest of 3 siblings, raised by her single mother, Diane, in a modest 2-story home on Maple Lane. Lila was known for her infectious laugh, her love of painting, and her dream of becoming an art therapist. Her canvases, filled with vibrant landscapes and abstract expressions of emotion, lined the walls of her bedroom, each one a testament to her creativity and sensitivity. Lila's childhood was spent exploring the woods behind her house with her best friend, Caleb Morrow, who lived next door. Caleb, a quiet boy with a knack for fixing things, was her constant companion. They built forts, shared secrets, and promised to always have each other's backs. As they grew older, their bond deepened, rooted in years of shared memories. To Lila's family and friends, Caleb was like a brother to her, a protector, a confidant, someone who could do no wrong. But in the summer of 2024, that trust would be shattered, and Eldridge would never be the same. By the summer of 2024, Lila was thriving. She had just graduated from the University of Vermont with a degree in fine arts and was preparing to start a graduate program in art therapy. Her days were filled with painting, volunteering at the local community center, and planning her future. She had landed a part-time job at an art supply store in town, where her warm smile and genuine interest in her customers made her a favorite. Lila's life was full of small joys. She loved early morning walks through Eldridge's oak-lined streets, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She'd stop at the town's only coffee shop, the Rusty Mug, to chat with the owner, Mrs. Delaney, about new art techniques or the latest town gossip. Her evenings were often spent with her mother and siblings, playing board games or watching old movies. But her favorite moments were those she shared with Caleb. Caleb, now 23, had stayed in Eldridge after high school, taking over his father's auto repair shop. He was tall, with dark hair and a reserved demeanor that hid a sharp mind. To the town, he was dependable, the guy who'd fix your car on a Sunday or help carry groceries for an elderly neighbor. To Lila, he was still the boy who'd once carved their initials into a tree behind their houses. They'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing, her dreams of helping troubled kids through art, his plans to expand the shop, their shared memories of catching fireflies as kids. On August 10, 2024, Lila's 22nd birthday approached, and she was buzzing with excitement. She planned a low-key celebration at home with her family, followed by a bigger party with friends at the Rusty Mug the next weekend. The guest list included her siblings, her mother, a few cousins, and of course, Caleb. He'd promised to bring his famous homemade lemonade, a recipe he'd perfected over years of summer barbecues. The family gathering was perfect. Lila's mother baked her favorite chocolate cake, and her siblings gifted her a set of watercolor brushes she'd been eyeing for months. Caleb showed up with a small, hand-carved wooden box, a gift he'd made himself. Inside was a note. "For your dreams, Lila. Always." She hugged him tightly, her eyes shining with gratitude. The following Saturday, August 17th, the Rusty Mug was packed. Lila wore a sunflower yellow dress, her auburn hair loose and glowing under the string lights. Friends from college and high school filled the room, their laughter mingling with the strum of a local guitarist. Caleb was there, quieter than usual, nursing a beer in the corner. Lila dragged him onto the dance floor, teasing him until he cracked a smile. To everyone watching, it was just another night in Eldridge, a night of joy, friendship, and celebration. But beneath the surface, something was brewing. Something no one, not even Lila, could see coming. The Eldridge Harvest Festival was the highlight of the town's calendar, a 3-day event held in late August. The town square transformed into a vibrant hub of food stalls, craft booths, and live music. Lila, always eager to contribute, had volunteered to run an art booth where kids could paint mini canvases. Caleb, meanwhile, had offered to help set up the festival's main stage, hauling equipment and testing sound systems. On the final night of the festival, August 25th, Lila and Caleb planned to attend together. They'd done this every year since. They were kids, wandering the stalls, sharing cotton candy, and watching the fireworks. This year, they were joined by a mutual friend, Sarah Klein, a bubbly barista from the Rusty Mug who'd known them both since middle school. Sarah had recently moved back to Eldridge after a stint in Boston, and she was thrilled to reconnect. The festival was in full swing by dusk. The air smelled of caramel apples and wood smoke, and the town square glowed with lanterns and fairy lights. Lila, in a denim jacket and a flowing skirt, was radiant as she handed out paintbrushes to giggling children. Caleb, dressed in his usual flannel, helped carry supplies to her booth, his easy smile masking a growing unease that only Sarah seemed to notice. As the night wore on, the trio decided to grab drinks at a nearby pub, the Copper Lantern, to cap off the evening. They'd considered driving home, but since they planned to have a few drinks, they opted to walk. Eldridge was small, and their houses were only a 20-minute stroll from the town square. The plan was simple: enjoy the pub, then walk home together, under the star-lit Vermont sky. At the Copper Lantern, the mood was light. Lila and Sarah sang along to the jukebox, while Caleb seemed quieter, his eyes lingering on Lila a little too long. Sarah, picking up on his mood, tried to lighten things by joking about their childhood antics. "Remember when we tried to build that tree house and it collapsed?" She laughed, nudging Caleb. He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Around 11:30 p.m., the group realized they'd stayed longer than planned. The last bus back to Maple Lane had already left, and none of them wanted to bother their families for a ride. "Let's just walk," Lila suggested, her voice bright. "It's a nice night, and Caleb's with us. We'll be fine." Sarah agreed, though she noticed Caleb's expression darken for a fleeting moment. The trio left the pub, their laughter echoing down the quiet streets. Surveillance footage later showed them crossing the town square at 11:45 p.m., Lila in the middle, her arms linked with Sarah and Caleb. They stopped at a gas station to grab water, then continued toward Maple Lane. At the corner of Elm Street, Sarah's house came into view. She invited Lila to stay over, but Lila declined, saying she needed to finish a painting for her grad school application. "Caleb's heading my way anyway," she said, squeezing Sarah's hand. "He'll walk me home." Sarah hesitated, something in Caleb's silence unsettling her, but she brushed it off. "Text me when you get home, okay?" she called as Lila and Caleb walked away. Lila waved, her silhouette fading into the night. The next morning, August 26th, Diane Harper woke to an eerie silence. Lila's bedroom door was still closed, her bed untouched. Diane assumed Lila had stayed at Sarah's, a common occurrence after late nights. But when she called Lila's phone and got no answer, a knot formed in her stomach. She texted Sarah, who replied immediately. "Lila didn't stay with me. She left with Caleb last night." Panic set in. Diane called Caleb, who answered sounding groggy. "Lila? She didn't make it home?" he said, his voice laced with surprise. He explained that he'd walked with her until they reached the old oak tree at the edge of Maple Lane, where their paths split. Lila had insisted she was fine to walk the last block alone. "I was tired," Caleb said, his tone heavy with guilt. "I should have walked her to the door." Diane's heart raced. She called the Eldridge Police Department, who took the report seriously despite Lila being an adult. The circumstances, her phone being off, her last known companion, the late hour, raised red flags. Officers arrived at the Harper home within the hour, interviewing Diane and Lila's siblings. They learned that Lila had been active on social media the previous night, posting photos from the festival and the pub. Her last post, a selfie with Caleb and Sarah, was time-stamped at 11:20 p.m. Sarah was questioned next. She recounted the night, in detail, her voice breaking as she described Lila's cheerful mood. She mentioned Caleb's odd behavior at the pub, but admitted it could have been nothing. "He's always been quiet," she said, wringing her hands, "but he seemed off." Caleb's interview was less straightforward. He stuck to his story. He'd left Lila at the oak tree, assuming she'd get home safely. But his account had inconsistencies. He first said he'd gone straight home, then mentioned stopping at a convenience store, only to retract that detail later. When pressed, he grew defensive, snapping, "I didn't do anything! Why are you grilling me?" His agitation didn't go unnoticed. The police organized a search, dividing Eldridge into zones. Volunteers, including Sarah and Caleb, joined Lila's family and neighbors in combing the town. They searched fields, alleys, and the wooded paths near Maple Lane. As hours turned to days, hope faded. On August 28th, 2 days after Lila's disappearance, a volunteer stumbled across a disturbing scene in a secluded clearing near Willow Creek, a stream that ran parallel to Maple Lane. Beneath a pile of leaves and branches, partially hidden by a fallen log, was Lila's body. Her clothes were torn, her hands bruised, and her neck bore marks of strangulation. The discovery sent shockwaves through Eldridge. Diane collapsed when she identified her daughter's body, her screams echoing through the quiet woods. The Eldridge Police Department reclassified the case as a homicide. Forensic teams scoured the crime scene, collecting DNA evidence from Lila's body and the surrounding area. The autopsy confirmed she had been strangled, with defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Traces of skin under her fingernails suggested she'd fought her attacker. A toxicology report showed no drugs or alcohol in her system, meaning Lila had been fully aware during the assault. Caleb became the prime suspect. He was the last person seen with Lila, and his inconsistent statements raised suspicions. When questioned again, he maintained that he'd left her at the oak tree, but his demeanor had shifted. He was calm, almost detached, answering questions with a rehearsed precision that unnerved detectives. Phone records showed his device had been turned off at 12:15 a.m. on August 26th, in the same area where Lila's phone last pinged. Surveillance. Footage from a nearby gas station showed Caleb and Lila walking together at 11:50 p.m., but a later clip, time-stamped 12:30 a.m., captured a lone figure in a hooded jacket hurrying along a path near Willow Creek. The figure's build and gait matched Caleb's. When confronted, he offered a new story. Lila had suggested they take a shortcut through the woods to clear their heads. He claimed they'd argued about something trivial, and she'd stormed off alone. He said he went home afterward, unaware of what happened to her. The story didn't hold up. Forensic results confirmed that the DNA under Lila's fingernails matched Caleb's. Bruises and scratches on his arms, which he'd claimed were from working at the shop, aligned with the timeline of the attack. When presented with the evidence, Caleb's composure cracked. He claimed Lila had made a romantic advance, and their encounter had been consensual. He said she'd asked him to be rough, and he'd accidentally gone too far. Panicking, he'd hidden her body and fled. No one who knew Lila believed this. She had always seen Caleb as a friend, nothing more. Her family and Sarah confirmed she'd never expressed romantic feelings for him. The evidence painted a darker picture, a premeditated assault driven by obsession. Caleb had harbored feelings for Lila for years, feelings she hadn't reciprocated. His quiet demeanor had masked a growing resentment, and that night, it had boiled over. As the investigation deepened, disturbing details about Caleb emerged. 2 women from Eldridge came forward, claiming he'd acted inappropriately toward them in the past. One, a former high school classmate, said he'd stalked her for months, sending unwanted messages and showing up at her workplace. Another, a customer at his shop, described an unsettling encounter where he'd tried to corner her in a back room. Both had stayed silent out of fear, but Lila's death gave them the courage to speak. The trial began in July 2025. Prosecutors argued that Caleb had lured Lila into the woods, driven by unrequited obsession. The defense claimed it was a tragic accident, but the evidence, DNA, surveillance footage, and Caleb's inconsistent stories told a different tale. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before finding him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Eldridge was forever changed. Lila's family created a scholarship in her name, funding art therapy programs for local youth. Sarah, haunted by guilt, left town, unable to face the memories. The oak tree, where Lila was last seen, became a memorial, adorned with flowers and paintings from those who loved her. Caleb never admitted guilt. From his cell, he maintained that Lila's death was an accident, a story no one believed. The town of Eldridge, once a haven of trust, now carried a wound that would never fully heal. Lila's paintings still hung in her family's home, a reminder of a light extinguished too soon. And in the quiet of Maple Lane, the shadow of betrayal lingered, a warning that even those closest to us can hide the darkest secrets.